The final act in a decades-old conflict or the start of a new chapter of hardship and strife? Ethnic Armenians fleeing by the thousands after last week's lightning-fast capture of that enclave. They're dismissing guarantees for their safety by Azerbaijan's president, in part because of a long history of bloodshed and ethnic cleansing by both sides, in part because of Ilham Aliyev's choice of company and location for that offer of reassurance. Azerbaijan has an enclave of its own inside Armenia. Nakhchivan and Baku has a backer, Turkey, and its president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The pair were in Nakhchivan on Monday, with traditional mediator Russia showing the cold shoulder these days to Yerevan. What prospects for EU-sponsored talks and more broadly for a peace that can last? Today in the France 24 debate, we're asking what next for Armenians. Joining us is Asia Minor political analyst Laurent Leloquian. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
From Baku, Javid Aga, journalist at BNE and Telenews. Welcome back to the show.
Hello again.
From Istanbul, he's a former U.S. ambassador to Azerbaijan, former mediator, Matthew Bryza, today board member of the Jamestown Foundation think tank. Good to see you.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
We'll be joined shortly by Georgia's former Minister of European Integration, Thornike Gordadze. The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation you have on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. Yeah, it's an exodus compounded by a tragedy. Monday's explosion at a crowded gas station outside the regional capital of Nagorno-Karabakh, Stepanakert. The death toll has now surged. It was 20 killed. It's now 125. They'd been lining up for desperately needed fuel to get out. The Red Cross had earlier tabulated hundreds of burn victims. Russian peacekeepers have set up a mobile hospital. Some 700 patients spent the night of Monday to Tuesday there. Laurent Leloquian, your reaction to the news of this soaring death toll from that explosion?
Well, first it's a drama, inside a drama, because there's the war, the starvation, the aggression, bloodshed, and now this explosion. It's only believable that this explosion could come by chance at the time of an aggression. So I have no clue to say that it is because of this or because of that, but the fact that the state of Artsakh, of Karabakh, has disappeared because of this aggression is clearly linked to this explosion, and also maybe with some sabotage. I don't know what is the reason. So
no proof of the sabotage at this point, but
no.
Certainly there were long lines outside this gas
sabotage
station.
or maybe just the lack of maintenance because of the falling of the state. So that's the problem. The problem is also that we have no journalists allowed, Western journalists, allowed to go there. And so we have no exact information on what's occurred.
Right. There are a few newswire journalists who are in Stepanakert, but not many. What we do know is that more than 20,000 have now fled to Armenia through the only land corridor linking to Nagorno-Karabakh. Many of them are women and children. Lisa Kamenov reports.
At the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan, cars and trucks arrive one by one, packed with displaced families fleeing Nagorno-Karabakh, like the majority of the enclave's population. At the border, people anxiously wait for their relatives to arrive.
How can we go back? Our Karabakh will no longer exist. There is no help from any country. No country speaks for us.
Exhausted from their journey, they register with the Red Cross inside these tents, are given food and drink before heading for towns across the region, like Goris, just 25 kilometers away. This mountain town has welcomed thousands of refugees. The local theatre is being used as a temporary shelter. But Goris is only a transit point. Many are lost, not knowing where to go next, still in shock and grieving over what they've left behind.
We took our children and left our homes to come here, to find refuge, a new home. Our nation has been sold by a government that does not know what it's doing.
The Armenian government says it's prepared to take in 40,000 displaced families. Charity groups are working round the clock to help meet this target.
Of course, I feel quite overwhelmed because the situation is quite difficult. They are arriving like a lot of refugees, and I'm not sure if our country is quite ready for that. And we, as a fund, we're trying to help refugees as much as and as fast as possible.
Humanitarian aid will become more and more urgent as authorities expect an influx of refugees in the coming days.
Matthew Brizov, 40,000 Yerevan says it can take in. They're already halfway there. This is a sizable proportion of an enclave that was an estimated 120,000 people living there. Your thoughts on this exodus?
Yeah, first of all, the deepest condolences for those poor people and their families who were victimized by that explosion. And anytime populations are leaving where their homes are, I mean, there are few things in life that are more traumatic than that. Yeah, the absorptive capacity of the government in Yerevan is indeed a question, as we were hearing just now on that report. Yeah. Based on, I've been working on this conflict for 21 years, either at the White House or the State Department or now with think tanks. I can say throughout that period, there's been, of course, incredibly bad blood in two wars. The Azerbaijani side, though, has always said their goal is to come up somehow with a situation where the Armenian population will feel safe living in their homes. And the Azerbaijani population that was evicted, 800,000, by the way, Azerbaijanis between 1992 and 1994 are displaced persons in Azerbaijan, that those people can come back. Of course, I understand the deep distrust on the part of the Armenian population that's leaving. I mean, there's been such brutality, and revenge is a powerful motivation. And they're worried that the Azerbaijani side will seek revenge. But I guess what gives me hope is at least the rhetoric coming out of Azerbaijan, which is that our goal, again, is to integrate the ethnic Armenian population that remains into Azerbaijan with full rights of all Azerbaijani citizens. Azerbaijan has resumed full shipments of humanitarian aid, but Azerbaijan is going to have to prove itself. It's going to have to, as we say in colloquial American English, not just talk the talk, but also walk the walk. And the main thing is that there not be a sense on the Azerbaijani side of revenge for the 800,000 Azerbaijanis that were banished back in the early 90s. And so far, we're not hearing that. So thank goodness.
Javid Aga, you're in Baku. What's the feeling there at this particular point in time?
Right now, people are not in celebratory mood yet because government is yet to announce the military casualties. So it's like there's somehow a mourning period. But as for the refugees, people are keen to see these events from the lens of 19th events, when the first Azerbaijani refugees came from, or IDPs in that sense, came from Karabakh. And according to my interviews with people, they are sincerely feeling that Azerbaijan is being more humane than Armenians have been to them since in the 90s. And most of them, for them, it was not something like unexpected. They actually expected them to move, and only a handful of them stay. Because in normal, random people's eyes, they do not believe themselves that they are going to live with Armenians, and even Armenians would like to live with them. So there's a difference between government's takes and random on the street people's take.
Laurent Lequin, as we're speaking, that exodus continues. The Armenian government estimates now at 28,000 the number of refugees who've crossed over. And you just heard from our other panelists how you can't erase history and the feeling of bad blood that's been going on for decades, since before even the fall of the Soviet Union.
But to come back to the figures that have been put forward, when we talk about 800, Mr. Breza said, 800 refugees from Karabakh, that's not the United Nations figures. It was 600, and not from Karabakh and Armenia at the time being, at Soviet Armenia. Most of them were from Soviet Armenia. And there were also some Armenians in Azerbaijan that fled also. They have been integrated in the Armenian society. They have not been, Armenian refugees from Azerbaijan have been integrated in Armenian society. Azerbaijani refugees from Armenia and from Karabakh have not been integrated in the rich Azerbaijan state and society. And they have been, on the contrary, maintained in their state of refugee to be weaponized, to be used as a political tool. And that's a first thing. Now, there is also a tragic record from the state of Azerbaijan that is doing what it is saying. So when Mr. Aliyev say we will chase the Armenian like dogs, when there is this park of trophy,
which he hasn't said in the last week.
Yeah, but we can, there have been an indoctrination of most of the population. Maybe not Mr. Javid Agha or some others. There are some dissidents, by the way, but most of the population have been deeply indoctrinated for decades, and now building trust, building confidence is clearly impossible.
Tornike Gordadze?
Yeah, and confidence is difficult because the hatred was cultivated for decades. There was no such a thing as a policy of reconciliation from both sides, and there were ethnic cleansings from both sides. It was mentioned the Azeris left Armenia, not only Armenia, by the way, but also the occupied districts by Armenia around Karabakh, 7 occupied districts where the most of Azerbaijani refugees were. Also, of course, 500 or something Armenians left Azerbaijan, the Armenians who lived outside Karabakh in different parts of Azerbaijan. So this is a tragic history of this region for the last few decades, and there was not a single attempt from the governments of both sides to make reconciliation. Now,
not even since the war of 2020, when you had those sit-downs between the two leaders?
Not really. These negotiations, they were meetings at the top level between the political leaderships of the two countries. With the EU mediation, we saw them in Brussels several times, in Prague, etc. But there's also always in these discussions this part of people-to-people contact, but it comes later. It's always once the conflict is settled, then this kind of things start, and that's why now Azerbaijan considers that they won, and it's not in their interest, at least in the years of in the eyes of the international community, to show that they are pursuing an ethnic cleansing. That's why their rhetorics are much calmer than what was done before in the 90s or in the years 2000, before they took their revenge. So now it's in their interest to show that Azerbaijan is ready to have the citizens, to recognize them as Azerbaijani citizens, to grant them some cultural rights, but not a political status. That is the difference between today's situation and the situation in the 90s, and all the peace plans that were discussed and where Matt was one of the participants of this process.
Yeah, and Azerbaijan's president again insisting Baku will respect the rights of the Armenian minority, all the while sending a message by hosting his Turkish counterpart Monday. Turkey, whose support was instrumental in the 2020 war, in the Azeri enclave of Nakhchivan. Now, the pair have long called for a land corridor along Armenia's border with Iran. Charlotte Hughes has more on that.
Cheers and applause as the presidents of Turkey and Azerbaijan launched the construction of a gas pipeline to a Turkish province from Nakhchivan, where the meeting took place. It's one of the official reasons for President Erdogan's visit to the Azeri exclave. But according to Turkish media, the two presidents were also set to discuss the opening up to Azerbaijanis of Armenia's Zangezur Corridor. It's a project which was mentioned by Recep Erdogan last week at the UN General Assembly.
We expect Armenia to fulfill its promises, especially the opening of the Zangezur Corridor. As everyone now accepts, Karabakh is Azerbaijani territory, so no other status can be dictated. Our primary goal should be for everyone, including Armenians, to live peacefully side by side on Azerbaijani lands.
The Zangezur Corridor is located in Armenia, along the border with Iran. Annexing it would enable Azerbaijan to create territorial continuity all the way to Turkey, via Nakhchivan, which has been tied to Azerbaijan since the 1920s but does not share a border with the country. Armenia has previously rejected such a land corridor, fearing that without Armenian checkpoints, it would undermine its sovereignty. The meeting comes days after Azerbaijani forces seized control of the breakaway region of Nagorno-Karabakh, which is mainly populated by ethnic Armenians. At the meeting, the Azeri president vowed to preserve the rights of ethnic Armenians living in the region.
The people living in the Karabakh region are Azerbaijan citizens, regardless of their nationality. Their safety, security, well-being will be ensured by the state of Azerbaijan.
But a growing number of ethnic Armenians are fleeing Nagorno-Karabakh, as the Armenian government made preparations for thousands of refugees.
Matthew Bryza, you talked about talking the talk and walking the walk. Again, having that meeting on Monday in that enclave, what message does that send if you're trying to build confidence?
Well, it's important to listen to what was said at that meeting. So President Erdogan did not make any statements about the Zangezur Corridor becoming sovereign territory of Azerbaijan. What he said was Azerbaijan is holding out the hand of peace, and we hope Armenia will accept it. Okay, that sounds like rhetoric. You heard a very harsh statement by Erdogan also in the clip just now. You know, he's not known for his subtlety, to say the least, I say as a resident of Turkey. But we need to focus on what the heck is the Zangezur Corridor. So going back to the ceasefire statement, which really is an agreement, that ended the Second Karabakh War, the Prime Minister of Armenia, the President of Azerbaijan, and the President of Russia all agreed that there would be a new transportation link between Azerbaijan, the main part of Azerbaijan, and then Nakhchivan, this exclave of Azerbaijan. That is agreed. But Azerbaijan or Armenia has not proceeded in the ensuing years in allowing it to be developed. Now, it would be managed by Russian forces, Russian peacekeepers, not by Azerbaijan and not by Armenia, but there's no talk about that territory in the corridor becoming annexed by Azerbaijan. That is disinformation, and that's not true. Last point is that Nakhchivan is a very special region for two reasons. One, it's the homeland of Ilham Aliyev's family. And number two, your beautiful map that's up now, it is the one spot where Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Armenia come together. So it's possible, and what's been under discussion is developing an organized industrial zone on the territory of all three countries that would provide investment and jobs and economic stimulus for this relatively remote and impoverished region of all three countries. So rather than seeming like an aggressive choice of a meeting, it actually should be seen as a statement that it's time to reintegrate Armenia into the regional economy, which means restoring the transportation links between Armenia and Azerbaijan on one side and Armenia and Turkey on the other side.
Laurent Lelekian, you reassured?
Absolutely not. When Mr. Aliyev said that Armenians in Azerbaijan will have equal rights to other citizens, he just said that they will have no rights because this is a dictatorship. So people there have no rights. So saying that Armenians will have the same rights, plus this inclination to hatred towards Armenian, means that they will have no rights. Now, to come back to Nakhchivan, this meeting with Mr. Erdogan is not by chance there. In Nakhchivan, at the beginning of the 20th century, was 80% Armenian, 80%. Now there is no more one Armenian. So we have an example of what will occur in Karabakh. It was the objective to eradicate the population as it has been done by Soviet Azerbaijan and then by independent Azerbaijan in Nakhchivan. Even the churches, even the graveyard have been, Armenian churches and graveyard have been eradicated from this territory. The true reason between that, and I agree with Mr. Bryza on this, is money and business and pipelines. and also control. Now, the point is, from a political standpoint, we have now a battle between the West, globally speaking, and Russia to take the control of this so-called corridor. And now I would like to add a last point, if you allow me. What is fantastic about, in which has been said by Mr. Breza, is that there have been a ceasefire agreement in 2020. Azerbaijan violated each of the points of the 1 to 7 or 8 points of the agreement, and now they pretend Armenia to respect the last one. That's incredible, no? That's a really cynicism.
But it's not true. It's not true. That's utterly false.
Well, they were supposed to keep the Russian peacekeeper along the Lachin corridor to stay and to keep the Russian base up to 2025 to avoid using forces. All this has been violated. So
that's not true. The Russian peacekeepers are there, and their mandate was not to intervene on Azerbaijani territory against Armenian
which peace? There is no peace.
Illegally on Azerbaijani territory.
But it is a fact, Matthew Breza, that there's been a 9-month blockade of Nagorno-Karabakh before last week's offensive.
I'm not here to defend Azerbaijan. I'm here to defend the truth. And what was just said, that all 8 other points have been systematically violated by Azerbaijan, is utterly false. I'm a former mediator. Words matter. Those points were won in the ceasefire statement through the blood of soldiers and civilians. And it's reckless, and it's a disservice to them to make a false claim that Azerbaijan has violated every one of those points. That's just utterly false.
Javid Aga, let me ask you, you heard Laurent Lélequian talk about gas pipelines. How much of this is about money?
Well, there was a new development today. Erdogan made a press briefing with Turkish journalists on his return from Nakhchivan. And during his comment on Zangezur Corridor, he said that we are working on this with Armenia, and if Armenia does not accept it, Iran is ready. Iran is looking positive for it. So if it is not going to be through Armenia, it will be through Iran, and they are looking positive at it. So it was about the railway, but I believe that it applies here too. So it's because of that, because of the fact that ceasefire agreement, the situation that it was signed does not apply, and there is no corridor anymore. So there's no point for Zangezur Corridor anymore. It was tit for tat situation, and Azerbaijan looked at this through the perspective of a corridor, because there was wording was that unobstructed traffic. But on the agreement, there was a precise wording on Lachin corridor. This was the point that sides had a debate and had not understanding with. But
so are you saying that Turkey has softened its line by saying, look, we can use Iran instead?
Yeah, the Azerbaijani media have been writing about this for a while, and they have softened their stance. And I guess it's because they do not want to, the government does not want to overextend its abilities, especially the military abilities, and because it still has to rebuild Karabakh, and there are still military casualties. There is a war. I think that, especially after Erdogan's press briefing today, we have at least hope that there is going to be less escalation now.
Tornike Gordadze, do you share that hope?
Yeah, I think there are 2 points that explain this softer stance from Turkey and also Azerbaijan. First is that both countries, and especially Azerbaijan, don't think that going in a military way, forcing Armenia to open this corridor and even occupying that part of Armenian territory will have much worse consequences for Azerbaijan than just taking over Karabakh, which according to the international law still was considered by the whole international community is a part of Azerbaijan. So there were some criticism about the human rights, etc., the rights of the refugees, the rights of the local Armenian population. But at the end of the day, according to the international law, Azerbaijan is right. But if Azerbaijan goes in Zangezur, which is a sovereign territory of Armenia, then the reaction of the international community will be much different, and Azerbaijan will face much stronger reaction. So that's why it's not in Azerbaijan's interest, and that's why I think, and it's the second point, both countries, Turkey and Azerbaijan, trying to create an incentive, economic incentive to Armenians, telling them that you should accept this deal because it's better for you. It will help you also to open up with Turkey, open the borders with Turkey, attract Turkish investments, and it will help you at the end of the day to depend much less on Russia, which is a huge problem especially for the current leadership of Armenia. So I think that the first stage is to create some incentives and to motivate Armenians to accept this in a peaceful way, and let's see what will happen later. There is already the road through Iran. It already exists, and they are Azerbaijani trucks and cars go through Iran to go to Nakhchivan. It already exists, so I think they can use it again if the situation is blocked there.
All right, so you're saying a carrot after the stick, an isolated Armenia looking for all the outside help it can get. Prime Minister Pashinyan on Monday welcoming Barack Obama's former UN ambassador, Samantha Power, who for the Biden administration today heads the International Development Agency, USAID. On Sunday, the Armenian PM taking direct aim at Russia's, well, I guess you could call it Russia's equivalent of NATO, CSTO, for failing to stop the overrunning of Nagorno-Karabakh.
It's become evident to all of us that the Collective Security Treaty Organization tools and the tools of the Armenian-Russian military political cooperation are insufficient for protecting the external security of Armenia.
Moscow quick to rebut in remarks on Monday by the Kremlin spokesperson.
We categorically disagree with the attempt to place responsibility on Russia, especially on the Russian peacekeepers, who are showing real heroism in carrying out their functions under the mandate. No one can reproach the peacekeepers for doing something wrong. We will never accept that. Armenia remains our ally.
Laurent Lelucan, did Nicole Pashinyan choose the right words in singling out Russia? We've seen a few back and forths in the last
Before
week.
addressing this point, I would like to come back. I don't think that performing an ethnic cleansing could be by no way compliant to international law. International law is here to protect people, and territorial integrity is supposed to be here to protect the right for self-determination and not to allow a government to murder a nation. This being said, Armenia accepted the idea of this southern corridor under Armenian sovereignty, with some Russian, also with Russian guards, not under Azerbaijani sovereignty. That's the key point. I don't think that it would have been a problem under this condition. Now, to come back on the true issue, there are two options about this corridor, either by Armenia or, as it has been said by Mr. Ara, or by Mr. Gorzadeh, by Iran. That's a battle of will. The question is not where is the road. The question is who will control the road.
But what about Russia now? Because how does Armenia handle Russia? Since Russia was especially supposed to be the guarantor of that.
Yeah.
Russian peacekeepers, we've seen them in the last 48 hours helping civilians in...
Russia was supporting the Russian interest in the region and not more. So Mr. Pashinyan was, to some extent, quite naive to bend toward the West 2 or 3 years ago.
Is he naive to criticize Russia today, or is he right?
Well, I don't know what he can lose more. Armenia is in the hand of Russia. The question is, in which hand is Azerbaijan today? The battle of will is today in Azerbaijan. There are two powers, Turkey and Russia, which are disputing the influence on Azerbaijan. And Azerbaijan is very cleverly making a kind of belly dance between the West and Russia. yes, to get both their support.
Javid Aga, you were with us 1 week ago. You look now at the way the chips are falling. How's that balance of power that you just heard Laurent describe settling between, again, players such as Turkey and Russia?
Russia has been in the region for a long time, and it's recently it has been. I guess there was Minister of Foreign Affairs that released a statement accusing Armenia of shifting towards like West and blamed Pashinyan actually that it was basically your fault because you accepted territorial integrity and you accepted Azerbaijani ownership of Karabakh. So there was nothing you could do. And I think that this actually shows the Russian interest in the affair. If you were for us, if you were gunning for us, if you subjected yourself for us, we could have actually helped you in that matter. We could have actually maintained our presence in the matter because there was a wording that Pashinyan, instead of letting this status of Karabakh to be determined by future generations, he just accepted it as part of Azerbaijan. It was some sort of a signal to Pashinyan and his opposition that we are still the great power here. We are still can overturn this somehow, and but also shows their intentions that they were expecting to stay in the region with the cost of like Azerbaijani and Armenian lives for a long time.
Let me bring in Tornike Gordadze on this. Did Russia fail in its obligations following the 2020 war, or was it really all lost for Armenia back then?
Look, Russian peacekeepers are, whenever they are for to keep Russia's interests. They were in Georgia in the 90s, and Georgians were calling them not peacekeepers, but PIEC keepers, peacekeepers. They were keeping pieces of the empire. That was their main goal, and that's why they turned basically the same people who were keeping peace were participating in war against Georgia. So there are no illusions about the Russian peace forces. I think that the people are quite unfair, those who are criticizing Pashinyan, saying that he was naive and he trusted the Russians. He had no other option in 2020. And the errors and the mistakes were made much before Pashinyan. For 25 years, almost all Armenian governments trusted blindly Russia, considering Russia as the unique guarantor of their independence, of also kind of independence.
But
of
even
Karabakh.
today, these are former Soviet states. Russia's the one that knows how to deal with both of these.
Yeah, because they have the most experience, and also they were here for centuries, and they also playing on the weaknesses of the others. But now I think that Armenia was the main power base of Russia in the South Caucasus is shifting and understanding that it was a mistake to bet on Russia. There were several attempts in the 90s by the former president of Armenia, Levon Ter-Petrosyan. Few others also tried to a little bit to diversify their foreign policy, and each time Russia came and they were once it was a coup d'etat in Armenia where the Levon Ter-Petrosyan was overthrown, and when the previous president of Armenia, Serge Sarkisyan, tried to sign an association agreement with the European Union, he was forced to abandon the association agreement that was already ready and negotiated by the EU and Armenia, and he was forced to sign the agreement with Russia on Eurasian Union. So I think Pashinyan came too late. I mean, he had no other leverages on foreign policy. Armenia had no geopolitical options.
And how about now? I'll put it to Matthew Bryza, because you have this Tuesday in Brussels, you had a second round of talks direct talks between envoys from both Armenia and Azerbaijan. Listening to Tornike Gordadze, what can the EU do in the face of players that are much closer to the South Caucasus?
I think what the EU can do is what it has been doing under the leadership of European Council President Charles Michel. It's to provide an umbrella to enable, I have to say, the very courageous Nikol Pashinyan and Ilham Aliyev to do what they clearly want to do. They clearly want to reach a peace treaty and then demarcate the Azerbaijan-Armenia border. Azerbaijan is now the status quo power. It's gotten what it wants. It doesn't want more conflict. Nikol Pashinyan, at tremendous risk to himself politically and even physically, has agreed to ceasefires that he had no choice but to agree to, from my perspective, analyzing it from a political military perspective, and now has jettisoned Russia, as we've been saying, as Armenia's key protector, frankly, against Turkey and Azerbaijan. So Nikol Pashinyan is all in. He needs a peace treaty, and to get there, he needs political cover. And the European Union and Charles Michel can provide him that political cover to reach the agreement that he seeks for his country, so that Armenia will live then a more prosperous, safe, secure, normal life.
But what if Russia doesn't like it?
Well, Russia doesn't get a vote. Russia may try to mess things up, but Russia's got a lot on its plate right now.
It still has military bases in Armenia, though.
It does, in Gyumri, it does. It does. It's got a lot on its plate, though, right now, with the disastrous war in Ukraine. So in my experience as the mediator, I always felt that the Russian side was constructive, even at the point of Minister Lavrov, creative, trying to get to a framework agreement, and as cooperative with us on Karabakh as they were intransigent on Georgia. But I always thought that in the back of Putin's mind was the notion that, okay, let's get to a framework agreement and we'll get international diplomatic credit for that. But I can always then pull the rug out, as you're suggesting, from the process when it becomes time for a peace treaty. But I believe that the momentum now is too strong. The situation has changed too much for Putin to be able to block a peace treaty if Pashinyan and Aliyev and the peoples of Armenia and Azerbaijan want it. Unless...
Laurent Lelekian, you agree with that?
Not really. Not really. Indeed, in this affair, I think that we are in a novel of Agatha Christie, the murder of the Orient Express. Armenia has been murdered and is being murdered by all the stakeholders. Yes.
You just spoiled, but go on.
Yeah, yes, for sure. I agree with Mr. Gordadze. The predecessor of Mr. Pashinyan relied completely on Russia, but at least it was safe for Armenia. Of course, it was not democratic, it was maybe corrupted, and so on and so forth, but it was safe. And the exchange, Mr. Pashinyan tried to get rid a little bit from this power of Moscow, and it has been punished. Armenia has been and Nagorno-Karabakh have been severely punished. And this is a strong message for all those countries which are in Central Asia, in Africa, which are not full-fledged democracies. The message is the following. Okay, if you try to become more democratic, do it at your own risks. You will be alone.
Right, but can EU mediation go anywhere? Or you were describing what the historical precedent. At some point, does Moscow just pull the plug?
There is no negotiation. There will be a capitulation of Armenia. The question is to know if this capitulation will be EU-sponsored or Russia-sponsored. That's a battle of win between these two powers, and there is no good power and a bad power.
Tourniquet Gordadze?
Yeah, I think that now
it'll be a capitulation either way.
I don't know if I would call it capitulation, but the conditions for Armenia will be difficult. But on the other side, that's why I think European Union can do something, is to offer something to Armenia. We know that the current Armenian government and also the majority of the population are pro-European. They are really tired with Russia, with the semi-colonial dependence they had with Russia for the last 30 years since they are independent. Pashinyan came to power because of that, because of the Armenian population and the youth that were really tired of Russia. Well, that was one of the main issues. The European Union now can offer to Armenia a kind of perspective, European perspective. I'm not saying membership tomorrow or starting negotiations or offering Armenia a European future, which will help a lot Pashinyan internally with his own population, saying that, okay, now we are now moving to Europe.
And what happens to those Russian bases?
And Yes, it will be very difficult. It will depend very much on what will happen in Ukraine also.
Yeah.
Of course, the Russians, they would not like to evacuate their bases, their bases tomorrow. There are also very strong economic ties between Armenia and Russia. It will be very difficult to cut them because in the 90s, when Armenia was bankrupt, Armenia had a huge debt towards Russia, and Russia bought all Armenian.
And there are cultural ties. The Kremlin spokesperson saying
that's what
that
they
there are
like
more Armenians in Russia than there are in Armenia.
Yeah, that's true, but also there are almost 2 million Azeris also in Russia. So this is not the only question. The question is that military influence and economic influence. Russia controls most of Armenian strategic enterprises that they got for nothing in the 90s because Armenia had a huge energetic debt towards Russia, and that's how it worked. And it will take years probably to Armenia to change this, and that's why it's in European Union's interest, in the interest of Turkey and all other players in the region to open up to Armenia and to help them to leave this isolation.
As we speak, Javid Aga, the U.S. State Department is putting out a statement that Secretary of State Antony Blinken has told Azerbaijan's president that Nagorno-Karabakh civilians must be protected. Is that water off Baku's back? Does the U.S.'s opinion matter?
I don't think so. Aliyev, when he gave this call to speech for the nation, he actually mentioned talking with Blinken, and he said that Blinken asked him, what should Armenians do? What should Armenians do in order to stop these military operations? And if he had to believe to Aliyev, it was Blinken who actually managed to Karabakh Armenians to surrender. And for the many observers in Azerbaijan, they do not really understand that Karabakh Armenian leadership, that how come they did not see this operation coming? Did they really think that they are not going to be crushed, bombarded? It was solved in 24 hours. And I see many calls for sanctions on Azerbaijan. Aliyev and Azerbaijani government has not shown any worrying about U.S. sanctions or U.S. intervention in the area. They do not have this problem. They do not worry about that.
Laurent Lelikian, just one last question to Laurent Lelikian because we're out of time. The European Union, as you heard Tornike say, that could offer a way to a little bit soften that isolation of Armenia. You agree?
Too far, too late. It will never occur. Never occur. Never. Even for Georgia, it did not occur. So it will not occur for Armenia. I agree with Mr. Gordadze that nowadays Armenia has left all its leverage in Moscow, contrary to Azerbaijan. And a last word, maybe a last word. If the Armenians of Karabakh were insisting on the status to be independent, it was not by pride, it was for their very security reason, and it has not been granted by any European country or neither by the USA. I just learned that today Joe Biden recognized the Cook Island and the Niue Island, 17,000 inhabitants, somewhere in a small teeny island in the Pacific, of course for economical reason. They could have given this security to Karabakh and Armenian, and they didn't.
We'll have to leave it there. Laurent Lelikian, I want to thank you so much. I want to thank Tornike Gordadze, Matthew Bryza for being with us from Istanbul, Javid Aga in Baku. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.
Thank you.